not only were these children seeing through the blindfold, but often they would see from a different area out of their head, like the back of their head or the side of their head. That was confusing and strange. And so when that was all going on, I thought I need to know if this is happening other places because it felt pretty, reliable. Another thing too is like, we tried on the blindfolds because, I've read like, oh, if you squint, light comes in. Yeah, it does. It doesn't mean I could read through a blindfold. Doesn't mean I could play catch or do a puzzle. And that's what these kids were doing. They were playing catch, doing puzzles, solving Rubik's cubes, reading, drawing.
Now, you mentioned that when you discovered that, yes, there is truth in telepathic communication happening for non-speaking people, that it made you question other ideas that perhaps previously in your life you had not really considered.
Mhm.
What are the things that you now feel open to that 5 years ago you would have been like, "No way, that's just outside the
Mhm.
known for me."
Like, even now, I would never walk into, like, a mall psychic or medium or something. I think, like, that's probably mostly just snake oil, fraud, fake, but I have found there are real, mediums, from researching this and meeting the people who test them and who put them through not just double but triple blind tests and all sorts of stuff like that. So I think that's something where I don't have any doubt now that that's real. Um,
So in
and
that, you're talking about mediumship, you're talking about people who are able to contact individuals who have passed, who are not
Mhm.
incarnate, but there's a soul consciousness that they
Yeah.
are bringing through.
And what that is, like, I mean, that's one of the things that questions we asked in season 2. Like, is it that they're truly talking with someone's, like, soul or someone who's actually passed on? Or is it, like, downloading information from a greater informational field? Kinda like the edge of a black hole that anything that goes inside of it, all information is kept on the edge. Like, is that kind of our reality too, and all information's out there? Like, those are questions we don't try to answer, we can't answer yet, but it's something that we explore. I think another thing was energy healing. That was something where, you know, it just felt like hopeful, and maybe this is just the placebo effect. We did a deep dive over 2 episodes into energy healing and covered a team of scientists that were on the front lines of reducing the growth of pancreatic cancer cells in a petri dish, but through energy healing. And people, some again cutting edge experiments with Reiki of people having 30% reduction when they're having Reiki being done, and they had a fakey group too, fake Reiki people who weren't practicing and didn't have an intention for healing, didn't do any of this stuff, and Reiki was much more powerful than fakey, um, and the placebo. So we kind of do a deep dive into a lot of this stuff. Animal communication, again, like I would have laughed at the thought of someone communicating with animals. And again, I think there's a lot of people who maybe make money off of stuff that aren't the real deal. Like I have 3 people on my staff now, and we're constantly sorting through emails and trying to discern, is this person the real one or the fake one? Are they authentic? Are they not? What's their agenda? Doing a bunch of research, like really trying to figure out and triangulate who we will talk to, and making double, triple, quadruple sure we're not putting anything into the world that could be, you know, fake. But as far as the animal communicators, like the people we've talked to have worked with governments around the world, have worked with huge, Greenpeace or, you know, uh, uh, um, navies, things like that to try to help with, animal life or migration routes and all sorts of stuff. So um, there's a lot that I think that people on the front lines of law enforcement, military, information, big technology are leaning on that isn't physical. And that was a big shock to me is, wow, often they can't explain it and they don't know how it works maybe, or maybe they do and I just don't know. But they're using it, and they're utilizing it as a tool. And that was also shocking to me. Remote viewing for one, things like that.
Can you tell me more in the animal communication, what you discovered about governments using animal communication?
Well, I can't actually totally because most of the the two animal communicators that we've talked with a lot on the show have told me that their agreements with these places are confidential, you know? Um, but like, so that's, you know, a major thing, but certainly like there might be something, you know, in one of the African countries who's trying to reduce poaching, right? And then have to work with, you know, getting elephants to a safe area. And how do you do that? Often it's like a animal communicator who's good, who's proven their worth, will come in and help with that task, and they're effective. And because they're effective, they get used again for the next issue and the next problem. And so, sure, you could say, well, that's coincidence. It's just luck. It's this or that. You know, I don't know how someone controls, you know, huge beasts that are wild and gets them to do what you want by sitting still. But these people have been effective, and then they get used again and again and again. And as we talk about in our season 2 episode on animal communication, I think it's episode 5, there's also an example of a woman who's worked with, you know, royal families and Olympians and national riding teams with their horses to try to get the horses to, you know, behave or do something or change their behavior in travel. And again, like it's something I would have dismissed, but when you start to talk to Olympians and national team riders, royal families and governments who use these people and say, we don't know why it works, but it works over and over and over again. And there's something there, and that's why I'm doing it. You know, um, you know, people don't have to believe it, but is it fun to explore and ask the question? Because something's happening.
Something's happening. The finale of season 2, I found pretty, I'll use the word mind-blowing. I had never heard before, and maybe I'm late to the party, about the phenomenon of young children being blindfolded and, you know, behind an eye mask, completely sealed off, and being able to see numbers and colors. And this is what you devote the finale episode of season 2. You call it mindsight.
Mm-hmm.
And it took me through the whole process of like, no, this is bullshit, to wait a second, Tammy, do a little more research, look online, look at some other YouTube videos, even outside of the finale of season 2, and then
Mm-hmm.
reading other people who are debunking it, but I'm not quite sure why, and then wanting to experiment. I went through the whole journey, the whole arc, and
Mm-hmm.
this was all like just within an hour, you know, and then wanting to experiment myself. Could I see through a blindfold? If I trained myself to do it, would I be open to that? I want to try. And then landing in a place of not knowing, but being curious.
Mm-hmm.
And I'd love if you could just say more about this phenomenon and where you landed in terms of people having an ability, young children, and why young children especially, to see through a blindfold.
Yes. So, you know, when I first was going through my own cognitive dissonance around the telepathy, remember, I was still meeting families all the time. And there was a school in New Jersey, and a new mom just started, and her son, this comes back to the mindset in a second, her son was answering questions before the teacher asked the question. And often the question might be like, okay, I'm going to tell you you know, what I'm looking like a picture, you know, it's about to come, and I want you to point to the same one to see if could they match. Did they understand what's going on? You know, so it's like a 4-year-old. And the child started pointing to the card before the card was revealed or laid down. And the mom was like, I think my child is telepathic or seeing the card, or I don't know what's going on. And so she asked the head of the program at the school, and the school, oh yeah, this is, you know, this is kind of a private thing in this world, but there's actually a filmmaker working on it. You should call her. She might be able to, you know, whatever. So then this mom gets in touch with me. And so we start talking, and I'm like, yeah, I can connect you to more families and this and this. And she was great because she started doing her own deep dive to figure out what was going on. And she writes back to me like a few weeks later, and she's like, I just found this. I wonder if this is the same type of thing. These are kids who can see throughout you know, with a blindfold on. And I thought, what on earth is this? And I started looking, and I just saw debunked all over the world. And I kind of didn't think twice about it. But then it came up again a few more times. And then I did my first test with this young woman. The first time I ever saw the quote unquote telepathy with my own eyes. One of the things we did is we put a blindfold on her, and it wasn't even telepathy at that point. She had to like stack color popsicle sticks together and that type of thing. And I thought, what is this? This is even a telepathy. And I thought, oh my goodness, maybe it's the same as this video this mom sent. So I called the woman who taught this mindsight or seeing through the blindfold in England. Her name is Nicola Farmer. She's wonderful. Talked to her. And then I thought, I'm going to go through the teacher training to try to figure out what's going on. And I went through the whole teacher training, and it was a few days, and it was expensive. And at the end of it, I mean, this woman is like, trying to equip you with tools to teach kids to do this. And I was like, okay, this is not a trick. I mean, she's giving you like the meditations and how to go through this and how to talk to the children and I thought, okay, so they all believe it's real. And then I met some teachers who'd gone through it, and the teachers were telling me, oh no, it's real. Like, I didn't even believe I could teach it, but it is real. And I wasn't going through it to become a teacher. I just wanted to understand. And so in my mind now at this point, I was like, here's a bucket of something that I need to explore and I don't understand, but I wasn't discounting it anymore. And then when I went to England, I saw this with my own eyes. I brought my dad, who's a materialist and a skeptic, and he's kind of come up a few times in the telepathy tapes. And it was pretty mind-boggling for the whole crew that was there, because not only were these children seeing through the blindfold, but often they would see from a different area out of their head, like the back of their head or the side of their head. That was confusing and strange. And so when that was all going on, I thought I need to know if this is happening other places, because it felt pretty, reliable. And the other thing too is like, we tried on the blindfolds, because, I've read like, oh, if you squint, light comes in. Yeah, it does. It doesn't mean I could read through a blindfold. It doesn't mean I could play catch or do a puzzle. And that's what these kids were doing. They were playing catch, doing puzzles, solving Rubik's Cubes, reading, drawing. So then I kind of went on a quest to like, who is doing this around the world? Found out that there's schools in China that have been really engaged in this for decades, and that it's a big thing for parents in China to send their kids to these schools to learn these tasks because it makes them better at school. Found, schools in America teaching it, schools in India teaching it, and often with different principles and different modalities. And then I met a neuropsychiatrist who was trying to debunk it and was going through, meeting all sorts of people, doing her own tests. And she became so convinced that it's real that now she's opening a school. And one of the most fascinating things that she told me is she said, look, I know that you've been looking at all these places around the world doing this. She's like, I think the only thing that's kind of BS is it doesn't have to take weeks or months. And she's like, I think they believe it does. I think their modalities tell them it does. But I think most young kids can start to do it within minutes. And I thought, come on. And so I put my kids to the test. I was like, can you come to the telepathy tapes office? My crew will watch. I hire, very critical minded skeptics. They're always racking through things like, so I was like, let's have you do it. And my son he does not want to ever be fooled. He just can't. He hates it. And so he put the blindfold on, and I'd say within minutes was able to tell you the colors. And I wasn't as impressed with that, because I was like, well, again, if light leaks in, maybe the color is bleeding through the light. That I can explain. No problem. But then when he started reading through it or telling you Uno cards and numbers and shapes, it was pretty mind-boggling. And then my daughter, who's 11, and I thought she was too old. And I kind of told her, I'm like, I know you want to be able to do this, and I don't know if you can. And it took her longer, but she started seeing colors. And then after many times, like maybe doing it 4 or 5 times, she was able to start seeing Uno cards and read through the blindfold. And so I don't have no idea. And I've talked to a few scientists who are like, maybe there's some sort of, optical sensors in our skin. We actually see with our brain, not our eyes, right? Our eyes are letting in light and letting in, information and detail. But could that be entering our body through other ways? Why not? Or is it something much more, woo-woo, like you're seeing with your soul? What is it? Who knows? But it's pretty mind-boggling. And I think, of course, something like this, just like telepathy, is going to be debunked and railed on and hit from all angles. But what I encourage people to do, there's no gimmick here. Just try it yourself, to put your own kids through the test. For the most part, though, I think what I've heard from everyone is that it's way easier to learn before the age of 12, and the younger the better. 5, 6, 7-year-old.
And what's the thinking behind that? Why
I
that's
think
so?
the irrational, scientific, logical brain hasn't kicked in yet. You're not overriding all the information that comes to you from other ways. You're not believing and telling yourself all the time that we're separate and things are impossible and that there's, you still believe in so many things when you're younger. And I don't think the filters that work to help us succeed in the world, which keep us apart, are fully locked. And I think it really just has to do with, you know, kids being more open. And yeah, it's
Is
pretty
it
remarkable.
possible, without going too deep down this, rabbit hole, but just a little further, is it possible to say briefly what the training involves? Like, how your son got up to speed so fast on doing it?
Yeah, that's what was remarkable. It was like Anne de Solar was the woman teaching him, and she has a new organization, nonprofit called Mindsight to help kids do this. And she put a blindfold on, and I tested it, and I was like, if he's gonna do this, I want it to be, so I kept looking on her and make sure there's no things, and if it came up a little, I'd push it back down, and so it was pretty locked. And so, okay, she'd put that on, and then she kind of feel around his eyes just to get him familiar with his eyes. So, like, just imagine with your fingers. And then she had me to do it too to see what she was doing. So she might be like, okay, follow my fingers. They're up here on the top. Okay, now follow my fingers this way. So he'd be hopefully looking at wherever the fingers were and just kind of activating, those muscles of the eyes, making sure. And then, she would usually do some sort of meditation, like, you're safe and you're loved and you can do this and there's so much more that you can do than very affirmative. And then it was just like instant, like putting up a color card. What card is this? A lot of positive affirmation. Okay, that was close. It was this one. How about this card? And I'd say after like 2 or 3 misses, it was like getting it. And that was it. So it was very quick and seamless and actually unexplainable. I'm baffled by it, but at the point now where instead of being frustrated by that confusion, it's just something I can marvel at, you know?